Welcome to episode number 47 of the CRM MVP podcast. Today, I'm really excited about this episode because I'll be talking to, by far, I think, number one most favorite blogger, Dynamics 365 blogger in the world, Jukka Niiranen. Welcome to the show, man.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And like I said, man, you're my favorite blogger by far. I mean, I have no idea how you do it. Honestly, I've said this in multiple episodes before where like news are announced in the morning and like 30 minutes later you have this like Bible written about like the functionality that was just announced. And it's not like I can even like because you're an MVP, I'm an MVP. It's not like I can even say like, well, we did have access to that stuff, 6 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago. Like in some cases, we do have access to documentation and features before everyone else. But I've seen that you do this even with functionality that we don't even know it's coming. It's like brand new for everybody. But here you are with another, Juka's Bible post about whatever they just announced. So I'm always super impressed, and everyone out there who doesn't read, I don't think there's anyone listening to this that doesn't read your stuff, by the way, but I just wanted to make sure that they know how valuable it is. And how do you pick that name, by the way?
My blogging really started way back in the days when I was still on the customer side. So I was a user and I was actually exploring what you can do with CRM at that time. So it was CRM 3.0. Well, that was my first deployment was in 2005. So a long time ago. Then 2008, I think I started blogging about what I've come across in the community. And then, so it wasn't really about promoting the platform or being a evangelist of it, but rather than just like sharing discoveries about what I had learned by reading other people's blog writings and tricks and tips that I have had applied in the real life scenarios that in the company where I was working, we were deploying CRM around the globe in our area offices, and there were so many different kinds of requirements for integrating the application to other products and like really extending the platform to levels that are kind of like normal these days. But back in those days, it was not really probably a very typical CRM deployment at all. So really, probably I got the spark from that, from seeing like how far you can go with the platform and like what the opportunities are there. So that's kind of been always my kind of a approach to it. That's seeing how much you can do with the product, and because one of the things that also sometimes surprises the readers of the blog is that I cannot write code at all. So I'm a pure no-code customizer, and I've got like this pretty much a fairly well-defined sandbox where I can work in myself. So everything that I can like point and click, then that's what I can bend to my needs and the requirements of customers. But then going beyond that, then I've never had the luxury of like being able to use the APIs. So I was then been trying to survive with the toolkit that I have at my disposal.
And we have, I think that in addition to the fact that I don't code either, we have a few other things in common too. Except for one, like I think, people hear my voice all the time, but like I don't think most people have ever heard you talk. Like you're in person, you're a very quiet person,
Hmm.
unless you feel like comfortable and stuff. Like I feel like you have like a developer personality, but like on a consultant's body. It's
Yeah.
like interesting. So I'm glad again to have you today. So in addition to the no coding thing, and I'm on the same boat with you, I think coding is boring. Even though the last episode was like the CRM MVP developer podcast. And I hope to have further episodes in the future about development. I really like to just use what's out of the box, like all the tool set and the not only that, but the coming up with clever ways of taking advantage of solutions and functionality that perhaps weren't created to do something, and you figure out a different way to do something. I love that. I really love when I read stuff from you and from everyone else out there where they figure out a way to use, I don't know, audit in a different way or workflows or bulk record deletion, whatever it is. They just figure out a different way to do it. And I love that stuff. And again, in addition to the whole no code thing, I think that we both like beer a lot, I guess. And when I was in Finland, you took me to a beer festival, which happened to be on that week that I was there. So that was awesome. But I mean, you're by far way, way more into that, right? I mean, you go on trips just to taste beer. So I need to get on that bandwagon. Can you talk a little bit about that? How do you get into that?
Yeah, I mean, I think beer is one of the best reasons to tour the world. So yeah, I've been kind of digging deeper into the origins of different kinds of craft beer for the past few years, and really, there's also an application that's been sparking up the interest towards that called Untapped, and so I think I signed up for it probably might be 7 years ago or so, and that kind of drove me then towards exploring a bit deeper about the kind of different variety styles of beers that are available. Also, then the locations where you can actually find those interesting beers. So it's kind of a social media for beer fanatics, and then by getting to know other people who are also into the those kind of flavors of beer that might be not the kind of standard lagers you would get in a typical bar. So that has then led me to these kind of beer trips around the world, or then exploring the more kind of craftier side of breweries, also in Finland. And yeah, the Helsinki Beer Festival, we were there a couple of years ago with you, and I think that's a great example of like also a community building around a kind of topic that they love. So it's a bit like CRM. I mean, some people are into CRM; they want to share with their knowledge around that. So the same thing pretty much for beer as well. I mean, people who are into the kind of finer side of craft beer, then they also tend to be those kind of professionals who then want to also share their expertise on that topic and like tell the world what they think about beers, and then also follow other kind of similar, so to speak, professionals on the topic.
Yeah, definitely. And I even a t-shirt I got while I was there. It's like I don't even know what company it is, but it's like this badass bear wearing like a kilt or something like
Ah, yeah,
that.
remember that one.
And people like compliment me on that. It's like, oh, that's it's like from a beer company from Hungary or something.
Yeah, so now you're part of the tribe now when you're wearing that kind of outfit. So
Exactly. Exactly. No, that was awesome. But let's get into the topic that we're here to talk about. And again, this topic came up for a variety of reasons. Number one, licensing has always been an interesting topic. And the main reason for this is that every time we get a licensing guide, it's a new world record, right? I don't know how many PowerPoint slides were on the last one, but it's over 200 at this point, I feel like, which means that it makes it almost impossible for anyone to stay on top of it and sort of make it easy for everyone to understand. So what caught my attention was I've been thinking about how do I, come up with a way to summarize our latest licensing guide, because there's a lot of changes now that we are full blown into Power Platform and all of that stuff. Whereas before, if we were doing Dynamics 365 or Dynamics CRM implementations, yes, sometimes you integrate with SharePoint and Exchange, and you sort of have to be aware about Office 365 licenses and stuff like that. But for the most part, you didn't really have to care too much about some of these other products. However, with Power Platform, with Flow, with Power Apps, with Power BI, now those things matter. Right now, I'm doing an implementation where we're going to be using three instances, because the three areas of this business are very different, and it just doesn't make sense to have them all combined. And, I'm looking at perhaps using Dynamics 365 licensing for the main instance, the selling instance. But then for the other instances, I might be looking at Power Apps licensing rather than Dynamics 365, because they're completely custom processes. And I will be essentially creating a model driven app rather than using full on Dynamics functionality. So now it's like it's a lot more dynamic, it's a lot more open in terms of complexity and what you have to know. But the sort of the bulb went on when I realized that you recently did a presentation on how to you I don't know if it was called surviving CRM licensing, but it's certainly, is you certainly took your approach to simplifying topics and, essentially writing a Bible for licensing. And I wanted to bring you on so we can talk about this. So I guess the first question is, it's not so much about why is licensing so complicated, especially nowadays, but why is it important? Why does it matter? Why should people pay attention to licensing and licensing changes, especially because at least till now, when we're recording this at the end of February of 2019, the licensing, at least on the Dynamics 365 side, is not really enforced, right? It's more of an honor system. It's sort of like you pay per license knowing that, you can get a team member and give them system admin and nothing is going to happen. But if you get audited, you get in trouble. And obviously, we know that Microsoft, they're not stupid. They're tracking all this stuff. And I can assume that in the future, anyone who's abusing the system will get penalized for it. But it's not really preventing us from assigning people the wrong permissions. Not only that, but I think that in a lot of cases, you don't know that you're breaking the licensing, right? You might be giving a team member access to an entity, read and write, that fires a workflow that interacts with opportunity or something like that. And by doing that, you're violating the licensing, but you don't really know that. So why is it important? Why does it matter? Why do I have to pay attention to licensing?
So it really boils down to the what does solution design mean in this world of Dynamics and Power Platform these days. So of course, one part of it is the technical architecture, like what features will you use, what services do you plug in there, and all this kind of technical details where you do actually have fairly like well-defined boundaries. I mean, things are either supported or not, and they either features or APIs exist or not. But then there's also the softer side of the solution design, and it's going to be equally important for the customer. So the kinds of solutions that a purely technical person might be drafting out, but without then paying attention to the actual the total cost of ownership. So not just how long will it take to build it, but also then how much services do you need to subscribe to in order to run the system for many years potentially. So the the business value of the solution is very much dependent on uh, the design of the underlying licensing model there and how you leverage it. So this is a reason why I think far more solution architects and like technical consultants in the Dynamics business should be paying more attention to the finer details of the licensing model, because for the customer, I mean, that's you can deliver a lot of value by making smart choices about your choice of services and resulting licensing requirements. And at the same time, you can destroy so much value by then making it so that everybody needs the full customer engagement plan, even though they're using just very simple features of the resulting application. So that's kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to then uh, not write the Bible, but to do a presentation about the kind of current state of licensing in Dynamics 365 and our platform uh, side of this business, because well, as you mentioned, the official documentation that Microsoft provides, it is yes, there's lots of it, especially for partners. There are huge decks that you need to plow through to understand the details. But then at the same time, I don't think it's even really enough. So they don't really then, if you look at the official documentation, then Microsoft will never then kind of point out give you guidance on what's a simple limit the high-priced licenses you need to for the customer environment. Have a different perspective into licensing guidance that can then look at it from the customer's perspective.
What would you say is like the most common mistake that people make today? Like if you're not familiar with licensing and you're thinking about creating your solution, what would you say is like the maybe the top 3 mistakes that people make when it comes to licensing as they design solutions for organizations out there?
Well, one thing that used to be a big issue was, of course, the use of team member licensing to sort of like bridge the gap of not having a sort of a flexible enough license to complement the first-party apps that Microsoft is providing. And now, when the Power Apps SP2 license was now then launched as the official platform SKU, so the when you're building your own apps, doing your XRM stuff, then that's going to be the license that you really need to go for, or that's going to be most sensible for many scenarios. Then kind of like now getting the customer projects and all the kind of sort of solution design practices to accept that fact probably is the biggest hurdle right now. And then there's also the probably another side to the kind of the opportunity that the Power Platform licensing now offers us, because if you look at the dollar values or prices of the Power SP2 versus then the kind of full enterprise apps that you would have to be buying if you are doing a traditional Dynamics implementation, then there really is a big gap there. That's kind of the builds up new opportunity for making making these solutions feasible for a new customer segment. So
It's a huge gap. It's a
yeah,
huge gap. Yeah, I mean, when I look at the pricing here in the US, and we're talking about full price, right? No discount qualifying, no nothing, just full price. The Dynamics 365 plan license, meaning the one that gives you access to the apps, the first party apps, it's $115 per user per month. And when you look at Power Apps P2, which gives you access to your own application that you create as a model driven application, it's 40. I mean, it's a third of the price. And if you're not going to be using the the first party applications, it just doesn't make sense to go for Dynamics. So I think what you're talking about is, and I agree with you in terms of this being the biggest mistake, is that a lot of partners don't size it correctly and end up suggesting that for all the users, you're going to need full on licenses of Dynamics, which then takes money away from the budget to actually put functionality in place that can be revolutionary for the company. So you're spending all this money in licensing that you don't need for features you're not going to use, whereas you could have invested that money in functionality and results, uh, other than the licenses themselves.
exactly. So the kind of mindset that you're only looking at the available Dynamics applications where you are either extending an existing implementation or then building something new that will be sort of CRM-like, that will have the sort of common use cases for customer data and sales pipeline and so on. So there is, well, this is one area where really the kind of official guidance from Microsoft doesn't really fully cover these kind of combinations. And if you look at, for example, how the Dynamics product team is communicating their licensing model, so they have a public facing PDF, the licensing guide for Dynamics 365, which covers both the customer engagement and and that it goes down into kind of the features that customers would be using in their applications. But then you look at the Power App side, and that's really a very simplified kind of a marketing page that they have there published. So scenarios there, but a very different language that they use, and it does feel two separate products when really they are now platform, or they're probably going to be in the future. So those who are sort of like deep into the customization or deployment realize that they need to also be looking at the other there. And of course, this is maybe think about why is then Microsoft investing so much on the side. So of course, that they can cover then so many new where customers would have previously been building some simple solutions on top of SharePoint, for example, or using some non-Microsoft technologies for building small business applications or taking them as SaaS services. So there's such a big net new market out there, which is the kind of business reason why Microsoft wants to push Power Platform as the kind of the primary sort of implementation of this platform out there. And then the Dynamics business is that's I mean growing us as well, but it's of course more focused on the kind of established market. So they are competing against Salesforce there, and it's many times the kind of places where you would be deploying Dynamics 365 customer engagement. Then they are sort of a fairly well-defined sort of CRM scenarios for sales or service or marketing, and there's not that much maybe uh, creativity being used there for like designing the solution in terms of like combining the types of licenses you could be using for it. So I think those kind of like the duality of the sort of product offering on top of the single platform is what kind of throws so many people off course there and makes them kind of ignore the potential that you have there in the current model already.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree with you. I think that, when you look at especially the licensing guide, the latest one with 200 and who knows how many pages, the interesting part about it is that it doesn't really go into detail about the Power App licensing. So from that perspective, it seems that Power Apps licensing is kind of a separate animal, or the Power Platform licensing is a separate animal. But we know that when we're doing implementations, we have to consider those as well. As I mentioned on the example of the project I'm working on right now, where I'm creating model-driven apps rather than using Dynamics out of the box. So can you talk about, from your perspective as a solution architect, as an implementer of Dynamics, what are all of those different options that you consider when you're creating a solution? So, in addition to apps and plans for Dynamics 365, what else is out there that people should be thinking about when they're designing a solution for a business?
So there's of course the current need that customers will have, and the kind of requirements that you are then using as the foundation of your solution design. But especially when you are then looking at uh, the bigger price tag of the first party apps that you have there in the dynamic space, then a big part there is then understanding also the other investments, other features that you will get with that license if you go with the kind of pre-built Dynamics application, versus then if you are just building something that is according to the spec of the customers. So it has very sort of unique but well specified functional requirements for a dedicated app, then yeah, I mean, then the Power Apps licensing, of course, sounds like a better fit there, because it's not so much about maybe kind of building many different sort of version, or gradually rolling out more and more Dynamics functionality. It might be that it's actually a fairly well-defined box and you're designing an application for that. And then it might be then in the future other boxes alongside that in the same company, where you would then be designing second and third and fourth applications. But those will be a bit more in kind of a I wouldn't say a silo, but rather for a sort of a well-defined and fairly custom use case. So then, of course, the Power App side is really built for that. It's then you are using the platform to its fullest. But with Dynamics applications, then I mean, there's the whole enterprise kind of a uh, pricing level that we've seen the Dynamics offering now move towards in the past few years. So there hasn't really been that much offering or pressure for building a CRM application for small companies for these very simple scenarios. But rather, we are seeing that all these enterprise apps for sales and for customer service, field service, marketing, and so on, that they just keep on growing with enterprise capability. So there's when you are then subscribing to an application like that, then you know that you probably will already have some features there available in that package that you might be like unlocking then in the kind of like phase 2 or 3 of the application's lifecycle, as well as then the continuous updates that you get with those applications. So there's going to be 2 releases every year that are going to be bringing in like tens of new features for each application there. So that's also then a very important aspect there, to have the discussion with the customer and like describe to them what's the difference there of building the kind of tailored app on top of the platform, versus then kind of relying on the fact that the applications that Microsoft has to build for the first party applications, that they're kind of close enough, and they will get new features like AI integrations in the future that are clearly going to be a big benefit for you if you choose to go down that route.
All right. So on the presentation that you did, I thought it was interesting that you started the presentation by making, like essentially sharing this disclaimer saying, I am not a licensing expert, but obviously you've done a whole lot of research about this. The funny one that I really liked is the fact that you added, if I'm wrong, it's your problem at the bottom. I thought that was hilarious. So it's sort of like, I'm not a licensing expert. I'm telling you what I think based on what I've learned, but if you take my word and you implement it and I end up being wrong, it's still your problem. Like,
Hmm.
don't come back at me and blame me for it. It's your interpretation of the licensing guide, which we're talking about the fact that it's complicated. And I think if there is one license that is more open to interpretation and sort of you thinking about whatever you think is best for it, is team member. Team member is often essentially up in the discussion because a lot of customers obviously are trying to save some money in licensing by deploying maybe a few team member licenses. Now, I've taken this stance of team member for me is a read only access license where I just give you access to see some information and you're not going to do anything with it. Now, we know that team members can write to some essentially custom entities and stuff, the stuff that is not first party, and they have read only to some entities on the first party. But I just think it makes it too complicated if you try to resolve problems with team members. I know it's not a popular stance because people are like, well, but then your customers could benefit from team member, but now they're not because you have this stance of read only and whatnot. But I just think that there's just a lot more potential to fall into an issue because there are some limitations in team member licenses that are super like sketchy. Can you talk a little bit about team members and why, you know, companies essentially want to deploy it, but in a lot of cases, it's just not going to work out for most people?
Yeah, so back in the days, of course, I mean, before we had the platform SKU of PowerSP2, then it was a giant gap there between the apps and then the team member license, and like there wasn't a sort of a sensible way to provide limited access to a few features, and so it's kind of a human nature that you kind of want to find justice in the licensing model, and team member probably was a yeah, once you start using it for more and more scenarios, then you probably are digging yourself a hole where you then end up like bending the rules and like misusing it for purposes that it wasn't really designed for in the original Dynamics 365 licensing model. And now, of course, last fall there was then the kind of redefinition of team members that Microsoft did, and this really uh, so they took away some rights that were within the team member originally, but more importantly, they added kind of a very strict but vague description there that it's meant
Yeah.
for these designated scenarios, and that is not for providing access to custom applications. And it's very problematic in my opinion, the fact that they are so in Dynamics licensing, they are so focused on the kind of perspective that everybody would be using the first party applications as is and just doing limited customization on top of them. Whereas then, of course, in reality, I mean, the lines are much more blurred and there are external style implementations all over the world. So it's more common to have those kind of environments than something where you would be using the kind of uh, large set of features from the first party apps. But that
Yeah.
anyway is now the kind of perspective that Microsoft took with a team member and saying that, okay, have full read write still to all the data there, and you can then edit some of the entities, and you'll then also have access to uh, edit 15 custom entities as well. But they have to be within the context of the kind of first party applications. And that is then, I mean, licensing terms, of course, should be something that's ideally you could technically enforce them. There's no way that this team member kind of this sort of design principle in this license can ever be enforced, but there will then
Yeah.
be future limitations that will really make it a lot more clear to customers that actually when you are building custom apps, then team members might not be able to access them uh, for that much longer anymore.
Yeah, and I mean, I I just wonder like how much of team member for Microsoft is about marketing and sales and having like something they can offer essentially, rather than how much of it is really really useful, because I feel like the whole team member license is it sounds really good when you're selling Dynamics to a
Hmm.
prospect and saying like, well, not ever use one of the things that we do, and I do agree with this. One of the things that Dynamics does better than Salesforce is their flexibility on their licensing, right? If you're on Salesforce, you're stuck. If one of your users or two of your users need to have enterprise level functionality, all of your users need to get enterprise level. There's no in between. You
Yeah,
cannot mix and match, right?
that's just terrible
So exactly, it's
from our
awful.
perspective.
Yeah, but in Dynamics, yes, you can mix and match. It's a great advantage to Microsoft, but how useful is, team members though when it comes to real world implementations and solutions? I just feel that it's more of a marketing thing. It's like, it's like when you sign up for like an airline credit card and they tell you like, "Oh, you'll get 50,000 miles and you'll get, to use them whenever." And then when you get the credit card and you're stuck on it, and then they tell you you can only use the miles on months that end with 30 days and only in leap years and only in certain weekends that don't have holidays, and like they make it so restricted that it's like, well, this stuff is
Mhm.
useless then. Like it was like the number one thing of why I got this credit card, and now I can't really use it. And like you said, they've added some limitations now that makes it harder even to find a real solution for team members, and harder still perhaps to be able to not violate the licensing agreement because they're not enforcing it. Like you mentioned, it's really hard to enforce a license where you say you can do whatever with it. um, but at the same time, how can you make sure you're not breaking? It's just like such a tough situation to be able to use team members. And again, limitations. Now we have a number of entities that you can have access to, right? That is very limited. And I don't know if I ever got clear on whether that include ISV solutions or not. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, I mean, first of all, if we look back into the original announcement of Dynamics 365, so I mean, the days when CRM and AX and Nav and all those ceased to exist, and we only got the 365 cloud as the kind of shining beacon that every customer was supposed to navigate towards, and that was the kind of grand vision of the sort of business applications team at Microsoft, that they will be unifying these two traditional big business applications, CRM and ERP, and then grant you a single license that you can then give for the whole organization to have access to reading the data from both of those, and also doing then some light work, uh, light editing of the data, doing your time entries and so on. So in that world, actually, I mean, team member probably was a fairly essential component for like selling the vision of Dynamics 365. And at that time, though, the biggest mistake I think that Microsoft made was that they didn't launch the any platform story at that point in time. So they kind of took away all the existing momentum behind the XRM deployments, and then just said, okay, when we have this unified CRM and ERP in the cloud, then that's actually going to solve all the problems for customers, and people will want to buy those licenses, and then that will also then allow them to extend the applications. But in reality, I mean, there's so much more that you could do with the current tools of CDS and Power Apps, Canvas Apps, and Flow, and all those tools that we now have. So it would be foolish to like not allow people to also pursue those kinds of application needs with the same platform. So we had a period of time there when there wasn't really a good answer for the kind of in the middle requirements there, and so team members was born into that world that doesn't really exist in the same form anymore. So now the platform story is kind of it's directing the big ship right now. So the investments are being made on that side, and of course, then the Dynamics customers benefit from the enhancements to Canvas apps and flows and Power BI, of course. But then the kind of biggest new stuff is being invented there on the platform side, and that's where the kind of new revenues kind of be coming from if Microsoft Vision then really comes into life with the platform story. So if we think about it today, then could Microsoft maybe have like totally removed the team member license type from their uh, price lists? Well, probably not. There's so many existing deployments out there. On top of the existence of that type of license. Could they have then offered some like actually more useful license? Well, they actually did, but that was called Power Apps P2, and that confuses people who are sort of using a Dynamics environment. So why would I then buy Power Apps licenses to actually sort of upgrade my team members into being better users for Dynamics? So this brings us to the whole kind of the terminology of the marketing team at Redmond. So that is one of the sort of driving forces why I write my blogs, why I do the kind of Bibles, so that I can like decipher the messages that are coming from the kind of marketing department and then turn that into actual guidance for the people who are designing solutions and customers who then actually need to decide on whether
Right.
to implement them or not.
Right, makes sense. What's the process that you go through when it comes to advising customers on their licensing? Like, do you, when somebody comes to you with a an issue or an idea to implement Dynamics, something you can resolve with Dynamics 365 or perhaps other Power Platform solutions, what's the process that you go through to come up with a recommendation in terms of licensing? Do you start thinking about Dynamics 365 first and then append some of the other licenses like Power BI Pro and stuff like that? Or do you approach it first with a more powered platform way and then only use full Dynamics 365 plan, level of licensing if needed? Do you go through a process? How's that process like?
Well, these days I really do try to steer away from throwing out the actual names of particular applications or licenses at the start of the discussion there. So usually I first need to do an introduction of what these how these two worlds actually now are uh, becoming one, and why that is a such a big deal for the customers, and kind of explain first the value of the platform there. And then after that discussion has been or after we kind of understand that okay, there are probably far greater possibilities in the platform that what the customer is currently looking at, then focus their attention to the sort of original requirements that they probably identified themselves already before a sort of a product specialist has walked into the room. So, like you mentioned there with the team members, so that's of course been a uh, great vehicle for the sales process there, when the salespeople can throw it out there that okay, this price is starting from this, but then it's really only at the kind of the last mile of the solution design when you can then really determine that okay, these user groups at the customer who are this biggest share of the total user base can work with team members, and these many could actually be better off with having the full plan there. So I kind of like it's not a reason that I would be afraid to like tell them what the price is going to be, what license they need, but rather the fact that I don't want them to draw conclusions from uh, figures that they see that are going to be meaningless to them because they cannot attach that to the features nor the user groups at that point in time when they first maybe see them in the marketing base of Microsoft, or if they look at the kind of prices or product catalogs that might be available out there.
Definitely. And I think when it comes to licensing, if there's one, I guess, common thread here is that how often licensing changes. And I think you illustrated that great on your presentation when you talked about the licensing guide and the fact that you can keep track of the changes that they include into it through essentially GitHub, right? So you can go there and keep track of all of the changes that they make on it, and there's tons of it. Like you added a screenshot on your presentation about the change logs, and there's like 10 changes every month. Adding things, removing things, rewriting things. So I think that one of the things that I wanted to make sure people understand in this episode is that licensing is not something that you can just listen to this episode and get. This is something you have to stay on top of it, especially if you're a solution architect or a consultant. How is your process essentially to stay on top of it? How do you do it? Do you follow GitHub? Do you follow Microsoft? Like, how do you make sure you're always on top of this rather than learn it once and forget it at that point?
Yeah, it really is totally similar to like keeping up with the features of the applications. So it requires a similar kind of a mentality there about being the being there when the new announcements are made in the partner channel, usually first on that side and then made public by the kind of the more commercial marketing launches for the wider audience. So whenever there's new pieces of information or even signs about upcoming webinars for partners about learning about the kind of new licensing model, then yeah, I mean, I sign up for those and make sure that I'm up and awake when the news are then uh, announced in Redmond time. So I'm usually every morning I start by checking the kind of the partner Yammer channels for Microsoft for the CSPs and Dynamics partners and those, and ensuring that there's nothing that I'm missing there on that front, because in reality the information isn't it rarely comes out in well prepared sort of like guides or comprehensive presentation about this scenario now regards to these licenses. So there's lots of sort of putting the pieces of the puzzle together as you go is the way that you can then model the kind of sort of the laws of nature in terms of licensing. So how do these pieces come together, and then what are the gaps there? What would be the kind of gotchas that if you now go full on with, for example, the power up side of things and forget about all the dynamics features, then what might be some of the features that are not mentioned in the licensing guide for this particular license? Because if it's not listed there, then it could be something that's also then missing from the environments if you just use a different license type, and it might be something that's not then covered by the new license type, even though you kind of assumed it to be there based on your previous existence of the Dynamics platform when it used to be a lot more simple, a lot more unified, kind of a server kind of environment where everybody had the features at their disposal and there were only a few licenses. Whereas now it's a combination of tens of different cloud services that you can subscribe to. So yeah, that's just reality that it takes a lot of time there to keep up with the changes. And of course, you don't have to be there. I mean, the first one to then always read the news or blog about them, but I find it to be kind of a gradual learning process for myself as well. So it's easier to like not just resolve half a day and then read through 200 pages of the licensing guide, but rather just consume these bits of pieces and get some inspiration from even the kind of licensing opportunities that these new announcements then give to you for your solution designs that you can create for your customers.
I'll tell you one thing I do that you don't do though. I can read Surviving CRM and just learn everything you've ever learned
Mhm.
super quickly. So you don't have that luxury. I do have it, and we all have it. So thanks for doing that. But I think staying on top of the licensing guide, I think it opens up a variety of knowledge that you perhaps didn't have. Like, for example, and you talked about this on your presentation as well, the fact that we have professional and enterprise capabilities within sales and customer service apps. A lot of people don't know that, right? A lot of people just jump into the enterprise side because that's mainly the advertise, I guess, capability. But can you talk about that professional versus enterprise?
Yeah, the professional side has been something that you don't see that much out there in the real world, and one reason, of course, being that it's fairly new. So after the announcement of originally what Dynamics 365 was supposed to be. So there's supposed to be the Enterprise Edition and the Business Edition. Well, then plans changed that there was no Business Edition to be launched, which probably was a good thing considering the technical architecture of the platform and the applications. But the result was that then there was a period of just selling the enterprise sales applications for discount for smaller customers who were new customers with a fairly limited number of seats that they needed. So that was kind of uh, a bit of a bandage on top of the wounds that the sort of withdrawal of the business edition story caused. And that was the sales professional license was then launched as the kind of a permanent solution. So not a campaign offering for getting discounts for the enterprise app, but rather than the level that's okay if you don't really need to go to the full enterprise level of features as well as then extensibility. So if the product that you see there covers many of your needs, and you don't foresee the application turning into a proper platform for you, so you rather buy it just for a sales scenario, then yeah, why not look at the professional that actually gives you a very big discount in terms of license price that you have to pay per seat. And so shortly after the launch of the sales professional license, there was also then an even cheaper version for customer service professional. And now that, of course, might give you the impression that it would then be the way that there's going to be this sort of a light version of the Dynamics customer engagement applications being launched, and that it would be a growing offering. But I really haven't seen much enthusiasm around the current professional offering, and really it's a bit the same as with team members. So there's just so many problems that you can run into if you choose to design your solution on top of just the professional features.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, when you think about the restrictions, like, okay, so like maximum 5 business process flows. Now, if I'm just implementing customer service, I don't think I'm going to have more than 5. I mean, you can certainly have it, but I don't think that's a big deal. Maximum 15 custom workflows, that can be a problem. And I wonder if like the functionality that uses workflows behind the scenes, like case routing and automatic case creation rules and stuff like that. That really just uses workflows, and even the SLA items and the SLA line items with actions and stuff. Like all that stuff is really just workflows doing that. So I hope those don't count, but still, like even if they don't count, I mean, 15 workflows is nothing. I mean, it's not a whole lot.
Mhm.
Maximum 10 third-party application installs. Like, okay, like maybe you're not gonna need 10 applications, but then the biggest one for me, at least on the implementations I've done, maximum 2 forms per entity. Like it's nowadays like we have so specialized support and customer service that you're constantly creating multiple forms, especially because you're trying to take advantage of custom applications as well, where I can specify which form goes in which app. So
Mhm.
if you sign in and you're level 1 support, that's your job, you get a form that is perfect for level 1 support. But if you're level 3, developer and support, like your form is not going to have all the same stuff level 1 support will have. So that is a huge limitation, the fact that I can only have 2 forms per entity. So I agree with you. I think that some of these limitations are insane. The 15 custom entities is tough as well.
Yeah, and one thing to actually pay attention there is that apart from the number of custom entities, then actually those other limitations have been removed from the newer version of licensing guide. So there hasn't been much fanfare around that either.
Yeah,
That there's probably now no longer a limitation there for the professional, but it still gives you the indication that you probably are going to run into those kind of barriers in the future if you just try and work within the boundaries given by the professional license. And one new thing, yeah, a new thing that's going to come up is going to be the app module limitation. That's probably going to be as big of a limitation as those earlier ones that you mentioned there. So if it's going to be so that you cannot design a custom app module for customers who are using the professional sales or customer service licenses, then I mean that's going to be a big blow for many simple these kind of like usability enhancements, for example.
definitely. So yeah, I mean, and that's what I was talking about with the limitations that we used to have previous the last licensing guide, is that as soon as you started reading that, you're like, I'm not gonna be able to use this thing. Now they got rid of them, but who knows, right? They can come back with them. And speaking of that, I mean, one of the things that we saw a couple of months ago was this, essentially this original communication to partners. I think this came out in Yammer, and then some companies like MS Dynamics World picked this up, where Microsoft was kind of restructuring the way they are charging for storage, right? Where they are, I think, thinking about increasing the storage, but not really charging people for instances or something like that. At least that's what the article described and what the information was shared on Yammer. However, after that was reported, it was kind of like pulled back. But if I remember, the retraction from Microsoft was sort of like, hey guys, we didn't mean to post this publicly because we're still working on it. These are not all the details on it. This is a work in progress. Don't worry about it. This is not happening right now because, a lot of people commenting is like, is this going to happen in October or whatever it was? Because I think that announcement came in September. Like, should we prepare for this? Like, are you changing stuff in October? And Microsoft was sort of like, no, we're not changing anything in October. This is a work in progress. But then somebody asked, well, are you introducing this in April? And there was no response, right? There was nothing that said yes or no or don't worry about it. Now, the fact that they didn't respond to the fact that it was a work in progress, and the fact that they didn't say it was coming in April tells me that perhaps that will be introduced pretty soon for the April release. And I guess what I mean to be by that is, how do you feel about those changes, and also about the fact that just because they removed these limitations out of the licensing guide, just echoing what you said, doesn't mean that they will not introduce it later, because they've done it in the past.
So what Microsoft really is working on with these changes is bringing together the Power Apps licensing and Dynamics licensing so that they would be uh, harmonized to a level where you can actually then acquire the resources and capabilities via either plan. So the current model where uh, it's been now just like 1 year when XRM replaced the previous version of CDS, and now then kind of became the new XRM, but it's just called Power Platform now, or Power Apps, all the platform capabilities. So there needs to be just a single price for those features, depending on which side of the kind of price list you are reading from, and that's been a big issue there on the storage side, and also then the instance or environment management, because even currently, if you look at the way how the Power Apps licenses grant you rights to establish environments, which are the same as the XRM instances used to be. So they actually are not a paid add-on like they are with Dynamics, where you need to buy the additional sandboxes and production and non-production instances from the price list. You actually get 2 environments per user with Power Apps V2, and that's really a crazy amount if you think about the prices that Dynamics customers used to have to pay for sandboxes if they want more
Right.
environments for their development and testing. Whereas
Exactly.
with Power Apps, you get those for all your users, so you could have like hundreds of environments actually on your in your tenant.
Now, I wonder if they'll have a limit, because right now in Dynamics 365 online, you can only have up to um, 50 non sandbox or production instances, and up to 75 sandbox instances. So that's a total of 125. Have you heard if they are going to have limits on those? Because I mean, what's the point of telling you that you can have one per user, or it's pretty much unlimited number of instances, but then put 50, on the limit? I mean, might as well tell me I'm going to get 50, right?
Well, if you look at the story for of Power Apps for the citizen developers, then the vision of Microsoft is that all the power users in the organization actually are probably going to be building their own apps and hopefully using their own environments if they are given the P2 license that grants you the environments and access to model-driven apps. So I'd be surprised if they wouldn't be prepared for this coming explosion in the number of environments when the same resources are then not used for complex enterprise CRMs, but also for very small applications that just happen to be running on top of the entity models and with the model-driven UIs.
Yeah, definitely. Now, in addition to Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform, we also have to talk about new applications out there like Dynamics 365 for marketing, because now that we're doing implementations, a lot more people are paying attention to the fact that there's this new solution out there, Dynamics 365 for marketing. It's not Dynamics marketing. It's obviously the new application. What has been, like, in your experience, the reception, I guess, to this new app? Are people talking about it, and what things should we keep in mind when it comes to licensing, so licensing for the marketing app?
Well, the marketing app is a good example of the short lifespan of licensing terms in the current cloud world, because there, before the application even came available in Europe, there was already a change in the licensing model there, which was about uh, limiting the definition of contacts that are counted towards the application there to be only those that you market to. So
Yeah.
marketable contacts.
But that was a great change, right? Because they were charging per contact, right, initially. And I was always saying, like, well, this just doesn't make sense because every single user you have on a portal is a contact too. And you're probably not wanting to market to them. You want to market to leads, and these guys are customers. Like, what are you doing? So they changed it, and that was great. And before you keep going, I just wanted to acknowledge this, by the way, on the previous topic when you were talking about business, what is it, business edition, Dynamics 365 business edition. You had the most, like the best, probably my favorite Dynamics 365 tweet of all time. And it said something like, if I remember, it said something like, after a year in preview, Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Edition is finally canceled or something like that.
Hmm.
It was awesome because it was exactly what happened. It's like they had that thing in preview forever, and then they just announced they were just killing it.
Yeah, but it probably was the right thing to do. So
Yeah,
it's a
exactly.
good outcome, but it's just a kind of a bit of a sad story for those who were then waiting for the announcement or
Looking forward to
planning
it.
their business on top of the offering.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, that change was good, and I believe that the change to licensing in the marketing app was also good. But again, continue. Just tell us a little bit more about how do your customers see the marketing app nowadays.
So the way I see marketing is that the biggest benefit it has is its reliance on the latest MS Cloud technology, or the fact that it's been built on top of all those Azure services that Microsoft has poured lots of R&D money into. So it's really probably the foundation is great, and it's ready for large volumes of data, not just the context, but also the behavioral data that you can get from all the signals in online marketing these days. But then on the other side, the pricing model is tied to the number of contacts. So there's a, bit of a mismatch there still with the kind of sort of a ready for big data platform, and then the combination of this pricing model that's familiar from some marketing automation products that are purely for that purpose. So it, the good thing now is that there's kind of a freebie version that customers get if they have 10 or more customer engagement plans. So they get then 2,000 marketing contacts to start with. So people probably are going to be experimenting with that application in some context at least, but whether they will be uh, queuing to jump on top of the platform at this moment, then maybe it's not the prime time for it yet, but it's definitely good to keep an eye on the investments that are being made to the product and how it then integrates with all the other sort of big data and AI capabilities that Microsoft has in their portfolio.
Definitely. And I think that that's the key when it comes to the investments is this, we're seeing this barrage of AI solutions, right? Dynamics 365 AI for sales and for customer service and all of that. Have you played around with those, and how do you feel those are going to, disrupt essentially the market since they are separate applications, right? Current customers don't get that. They have to kind of upgrade to be able to get those capabilities.
It's probably very early days for AI, and it's even more earlier days for the bundling them into dedicated applications. So I firmly believe that AI is going to be the one of the key factors why Microsoft is going to be gaining market share from competitors. But then it's probably going to be not via launching these separate apps or add-ons that you can purchase on top of your current plans, but rather than the features that are going to be built into all the applications that we use from Microsoft. So it's the if you compare it to a very well established model like a CRM application, then the what should you be charging for a kind of a data on how customers will react to it. So I'm thinking that these are a bit experimental as products still, and we're probably going to see a lot more changes to them than compared to these small adjustments in the traditional Dynamics the CRM applications side. Separate apps forever, or are they going to be bundled into the plans at some point? So that's something we'll probably see during the next 1 or 2 years, how they then evolve into, or what's going to be their way to generate revenue for Microsoft. So I'm sure to build applications on top of, but then is it going to be these current apps? Then probably not.
Awesome. Well, man, thank you so much for being on the show today. As I mentioned, I really appreciate all the work that you do and the blogs that you write. They are almost 100% of the content that I use to create Dynamics 365 news fix every month. So I should probably give you credit on the show, like a executive producer or something. I don't know what that would be, or chief content provider. Because again, the work that you do is awesome. We're super lucky to have someone like you in the community to be able to learn from, and a lot of people that don't follow you that hopefully they listen to this podcast and start doing that. Again, I'm your fan number one. But how can people get in touch with you if they have any questions, or if they want to start following all the stuff that you write about? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
So the one domain to keep in mind is survivingcrm.com, all into one. So that's where you'll then find my social media profiles. So I'm also on Twitter. Jukka N is the handle there, but you'll find also that feed on the blog page there. So keep an eye on what I post there, and then what kind of Twitter feeds I have there linked to the sidebar, and then you'll know what I learn.
Awesome. Thank you. And I'm looking forward to seeing you at the MVP Summit. Are you coming to the Business Application Summit in June?
I haven't decided on that yet, but I'll definitely be at the MVP Summit. So we can have a great time with all the MVPs, and also then learning from the product team about what they plan to do, for example, with the licensing dimension in the future.
Exactly. Can't wait. And thanks everyone for tuning in to this episode of the CRM MVP podcast. As usual, follow us on Twitter and give us any suggestions for future topics or future guests. All of our episodes are online at crmmvppodcast.com.